Hello, you're watching the Ruslan Belov channel. The battles on the front lines continue, and we continue to analyze the situation. Let's move to the map. So friends, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, the armed forces of Ukraine have redeployed reserves to the Sumy region. They pulled these reserves from the southern Donetsk area, which is why everything is now collapsing there. And by the way, the situation continues to deteriorate for them. Just in the past day, they lost another village. But we'll talk about that a bit later. So they moved their reserves to the Sumy direction, which allowed them to slow down our advance, and even, for the first time in a long while, organize a counterattack. Well, I mean a somewhat successful counterattack. Though calling it very successful would be an exaggeration, as they didn't achieve anything significant. But let's say they managed to organize a counterattack where they achieved at least something. And they launched it in the area of the village of Andreevka. Here, take a look. This section that fell under Ukrainian control is what we'd call a wedge. That's what the Ukrainian armed forces were able to achieve during their counteroffensive in the past 24 hours. They managed to push Russian forces back by 700 meters on the southern side. Slightly further south, they also pushed Russian troops a bit northward. As I said, their total advance was about 700 meters, more precisely 680 meters. The area of territory gained was 0.3 square kilometers, a tiny figure compared to the daily advances made by the Russian army. Moreover, some Ukrainian soldiers were captured, others were killed. I posted a video on my Telegram channel showing one of our soldiers filming the aftermath. 2 Ukrainian troops killed in action, 1 wounded and captured. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything here. Yes, it's unpleasant that the Ukrainian armed forces were able to organize a counterattack and even slightly push us back. But listen, that was the whole idea, to lure their reserves here and thereby weaken sectors of the front that are far more important to the Russian army. Actually, reserves might not even be the right word. It's more accurate to say they redeployed troops from other directions where they were already engaged. And that's exactly what they did. They shifted forces and weakened those areas. As anyone who watched yesterday's episode knows, their front in southern Donetsk collapsed. 60 square kilometers were taken in just one day. So I'm not going to cry over the fact that they captured just 0.3 square kilometers here, while the Russian army, due to their weakened front, gained 60 square kilometers. That would be ridiculous. Let them keep trying to advance and redeploy troops from elsewhere. That just means more weak spots and more collapses like the one we saw 2 days ago. So, as the saying goes, let them go right ahead. Now let's talk about Russian army advances. As I already mentioned, the Ukrainian forces continue to collapse in the south of Donetsk region. Of course, not at the same pace as we saw a day ago when we took 60 square kilometers in one strike. But expecting such rapid advances every single day would be naive. Of course not. You need time to secure the area and clean it up. And that's exactly what's being done now. Nevertheless, Ukraine has not been able to stop or even slow down our advance on this weakened front, especially since they've moved reserves to Sumy. In the past 24 hours, our forces launched a successful attack on the village of Perebudovo, which is near Komar. The attack was a success. Russian troops entered the eastern part of the village, advanced 1.5 kilometers, reached the western outskirts, and managed to completely push Ukrainian forces out of the village within a single day. Footage from objective control shows Russian flags flying in different parts of Perebudovo, confirming full and undisputed control over the village by the Russian army. So the entire defense hub, Komar and Perebudovo, which formed a small agglomeration, has now been broken. They tried to turn this place into another fortress, but failed. The defense node was taken within a relatively short period. The only question now is, what's the next target? Since the Ukrainians are clearly struggling, it's crucial to fully exploit that advantage. The next objectives are the villages of Mirna and Podubna. From our current positions, it's less than 2 kilometers to Mirna, 1.8 kilometers to be exact, and a bit more than 3 kilometers to Podubna. Just a couple of months ago, these would have seemed like large distances. But now, with our daily gains of 2 to 3 kilometers, we've grown used to it. Or like 2 days ago, We advanced 8.5 kilometers. The only complication in this sector before reaching those villages is the presence of rivers. And you know that river crossings always present challenges. Even if the rivers are small, as in this case, it's still difficult. That said, I'm confident that the Vostok group will handle it. They've already dealt with similar tasks before. Yesterday, there were also reports that our troops entered Yolta, a small village in Zaporizhzhia, taken under control the day before. But I haven't seen any confirmation in the form of objective control footage. So we'll keep that in mind. The Russian army is advancing in that sector, and soon we should receive more good news from there. Let's continue. Regarding the area near the Dnipropetrovsk region, I've got nothing specific to report for now. But judging by the updates I've been getting, we'll soon see some significant map changes, at least in that pocket. But for now, silence. Where our troops did manage to slightly improve their positions yesterday was in the Pokrovsk direction, north of Novoserhivka. The advance was modest, just 750 meters, but the objective is extremely important. And what's the objective? Let's go a bit north. Here's the goal, to get behind the Ukrainian garrison in Udakne. Those who regularly follow the reports know that Udakne is a heavily fortified stronghold of the Ukrainian armed forces. The Russian army has been fighting for it for, 6 months now? And so far, we haven't been able to break through. But if we can reach the western outskirts of the town, the situation could change drastically, not just for the garrison in Udakne, but for the entire western flank of Pokrovsk. Because once Udakne falls, the whole defensive line there will collapse immediately. On other parts of the Pokrovsk front, things are quiet. But where it's definitely not quiet is on the eastern flank, or rather the Kostiantynivka direction. There, the battles for Yablonivka and Oleksandro-Kalinov continue. There were reports that Oleksandro-Kalinov had been completely taken by Russian forces. But I verified this with guys on the ground. That's not true. Ukrainian troops are still holding the northern part of the village, so someone's jumping the gun with these announcements. Also worth noting are the battles in Serebryanka, which is in the Siversk direction. As expected, the Ukrainian forces are putting up fierce resistance. Although we've entered the eastern part of the village and now control a key height there, we haven't been able to advance further yet. Fighting remains intense. And you know, yesterday I had a good laugh at Syrski's statement. He claimed they control 90 square kilometers in Kursk region. Really? Show me on the map where this territory is. Where exactly are they supposedly in control of 90 square kilometers of Kursk region? Near Tayotkino. What are they controlling there? 1 or 1.5 square kilometers of tree lines. If they live in a fantasy world where they think they control nearly 100 square kilometers of Russian territory, well, good for them. Let them live in that world of pink ponies where everything's great. But in the real world, where there are no pink ponies, Russian soldiers are doing the hard work and moving forward every day. Now a few words about political events. The Iran-Israel standoff. After the US Air Force and Navy dropped 12 special bunker-buster bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities and launched 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at them, Iran's parliament supported a motion to block the Strait of Hormuz, a key route for oil exports from the Persian Gulf states. The final decision on this matter will be made by Iran's National Security Council. Experts warn that closing the strait could reduce global oil supplies by 20%, triggering a surge in prices up to $250 per barrel. Iraq's Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that blocking the Strait of Hormuz could lead to the loss of up to 5 million barrels of oil per day from the region and may cause prices to jump to $200 to $300 per barrel. Previously, JP Morgan analysts also predicted that a blockade of the strait amid a major conflict would raise oil prices to at least $130 per barrel. Following the US strikes, Dmitry Medvedev made a statement. What exactly have the Americans achieved with their night strike on 3 sites in Iran? It appears that critical infrastructure of Iran's nuclear cycle was either not damaged or only slightly affected. The enrichment of nuclear materials, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are now ready to directly supply Iran with nuclear warheads. Israel is under attack, Explosions are rocking the region, and people are panicking. The US is now drawn into a new conflict with the prospect of a ground operation, Medvedev wrote. Iran's political regime has survived and, in all likelihood, has even become stronger. The people are rallying around the spiritual leadership, including many who previously didn't support it. Trump, who came to power as a president of peace, has started a new war for the United States. The vast majority of countries in the world oppose the actions of Israel and the US. At this rate, Trump has no chance of getting a Nobel Peace Prize. Great start. Congratulations, Mr. President, Medvedev added. Meanwhile, a very important detail was made public. According to American sources, Iran was warned in advance about the strike and the specific targets. Yuri Podolyaka writes that based on publicly available information, this warning came at least several days ahead of the strike. This allowed the Iranians to evacuate all dangerous radioactive materials to a safe location, so that the Americans wouldn't have to explain why they caused another Chernobyl in Iran, and the Iranians wouldn't have to deal with one. It's also possible that valuable equipment was removed and the entire staff evacuated. Iran stated that the facility was not seriously damaged, only partially, including 2 access tunnels leading to it. We were in the midst of diplomatic negotiations with the US when the Israelis ruined everything, said Iran's foreign minister. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of Defense claimed that the US destroyed Iran's nuclear program, noting that B-2 Spirit strategic bombers and bunker-buster bombs were used during the strike. A source reported that Zelensky's office received strict conditions from the Trump administration regarding the peace track. Kyiv is expected to agree to most points in the Russian memorandum and move on to coordinating positions for upcoming meetings in Istanbul. Ukraine's proposals are no longer being considered in the US, which is now distancing itself from both the idea of peacekeepers and the plan to use frozen Russian assets. It is reported that Yermak's downfall has begun for several reasons. MI6 is undergoing a leadership change, along with a shift in strategic approach. The Americans are unhappy with Yermak's ongoing attempts to sabotage the peace process. They are also retaliating for his betrayal of Trump in 2020, when Yermak leaked everything to Biden's globalist team, a move that almost landed Trump in jail. This is expected to widen the rift within Ukraine's political elite. Yermak and Zelensky's positions have seriously weakened following the recent Politico publication, writes the Legitimny channel. Washington is now seriously concerned about the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran isn't rushing, but is sending signals to the US that escalation can continue, step by step. However, the risk of an oil shock is forcing the Trump team to practically beg Iran not to shut down the strait, writes Dudikoff. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have alternative routes to supply oil to world markets, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. For example, the UAE can redirect about 1.5 million barrels per day, out of its current 2.7 million, via a port south of the strait. However, Iraq, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar have no such alternatives. Iran can still export a limited volume, but not much. Currently, 21 million barrels of oil and 10 billion cubic meters of gas pass through the Strait of Hormuz daily. Wall Street predicts that oil prices could soar to $130 or more if the strait is blocked. This would cause a shock not only to China, Japan, and South Korea, but also to Britain and the EU. And the US would not be spared either, since 7 to 10% of Saudi oil still goes to the American market. Such a price spike would trigger an energy crisis in the US, similar to 2022, when gasoline prices averaged $5 per gallon and in troubled states like California approached double digits. That year, Biden's approval rating plummeted to 30%. Trump would face the same fate. American voters do not forgive spikes in fuel prices, no matter who is in office. Experts already forecast US economic stagnation, with growth at just over 1% in 2025. A full-blown oil shock would likely plunge it into a recession. These risks are what's causing the Trump administration to scramble, Dudikoff notes. Iran may now be ready to play its ace. The Strait of Hormuz, the closure of which could collapse the global economy. The Iranian parliament has endorsed the idea of blocking the strait, a vital route for Middle Eastern oil and gas exports. Alternatives exist, such as pipelines, but not all countries have access to them. The final decision now lies with Iran's National Security Council. If Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, it will trigger a global energy shock. Oil prices could jump to $250 per barrel, hitting major importers like China, India, Japan, and South Korea. The US and its allies would likely try to restore navigation by force, which risks a major military escalation. At the same time, Iran would also face severe consequences, losing up to 90% of its oil exports, facing tighter sanctions, and plunging deeper into economic crisis. Alternative routes, like the East-West oil pipeline in Saudi Arabia, would not be able to fully compensate for the halted sea shipments, noted politician Oleg Tsaryov. He also emphasized that such a move could provoke strikes by Israel and the US on Iran's three main facilities, potentially bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. This, he says, is why the decision to close the strait has not yet been made. Thank you for watching and staying informed with us. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. Stay safe, stay sharp, and see you in the next update.